Well, to be honest, there's sometimes you have a dream and it feels the following morning like your whole life has been changed. I had one of those dreams last night. It was an intimate enough dream, but I'll tell it to you anyway. Before I do, the context is that I'm in Lismore. It's a town in Waterford. It's kind of surrounded by mountainy territory, and it's very beautiful. And I think the King of England, when he was the Prince of Wales, once came here with his consort or wife or queen or whatever, and did a bit of walking in the hills around here. I think so. But anyway, I'm down here for a festival, and I'm giving a talk tonight, and I'm looking forward to that. It's always good fun meeting people. But so it's so far down that I came last night and went to bed. Lovely old-fashioned room. It's a kind of an old-fashioned house. I think it used to be the hunting lodge in connection with the castle, and I think that the owners of the castle, whatever duke owns the castle, was one time in a card game and he lost his hunting lodge, and I think that's why it's here, separate from the estate, and don't know who owns it, but it's very, very well kept, and it's a bed and breakfast. Ballyraftery bed and breakfast in Lismore, yeah. I'd highly recommend it. It's lovely. And the grounds are beautiful. You know, huge, big, mature trees, absolutely gorgeous. Lovely lawn, and you know, there's rabbits on the lawn. I actually saw rabbits on the lawn this morning. I saw them last night, and I thought, you know, they were sitting up on the lawn beside the car and looking at me, and I thought, God, they must be pets, you know, some must have children in the house or something. And this morning I looked out the window. I was having my breakfast at 7:30, a nice poached egg and 2 sausages, which were all right, you know, they were emaciated little sausages, if you know what I mean, which are nicer than big fat sausages. I don't like big fat sausages. I'm always worried that they mightn't be cooked inside. Anyway, I'm looking out the window, having my cup of tea, and I see another 2 rabbits. So I said to the lady in the house, are they pets? And she said, no. She says, no, she's not the owner. She works here. But she said that the owner is crucified because he loves to have a nice fancy lawn. And she said the rabbits keep digging up holes in the lawn. Well, I never heard of that for years. You know, in Leitrim we'd have hares that'd be nearly the size of a small donkey, and they'd be hopping up and down the road there in March like lunatics, like really lunatics, middle of the road, but 7 in the morning, or sometimes I'd see them sitting up on the water tank in the backyard, looking at you. Amazing creatures, the hare. And there's a lot of Irish pistrogues, folk tales about hares. You should never kill a hare, they say, because the hares can be like embodiments of certain spirits, like fairy spirits. And if you killed one, they might kill one of yours. And there was a terrible thing happened. I'll tell you this now, and it's a true story. But there was a man told me this in Cavan one time. This is a terrible story now. Prepare yourself. Trigger warning. It'll ruin your day. But he was out shooting, looking for pheasants and that, and he couldn't find any. And then running up the road, he saw a hare. And he was in such a humour that he shot at the hare and killed it. And about a week later, he had a tragedy in the house. Now that's a pishtro, do you know what I mean? Like, what I would define as a pishtro is sort of stories that refer to the transcendent presence that's in the world, but in a dark way. Do you know what I mean? As if, like when I think of the surface of reality having a depth to it, I think of the depth as being an all-loving presence, you know. When I sit here in this bedroom of a bed and breakfast and look out at the garden and at the big trees, I sense that I'm in my mother's arms, you know. I sense that I'm loved. I sense that the relationship between me, my consciousness, and whatever is the great ground of all being, it's one of love, it's one of being minded. So that's the way that my faith goes, you know, that's the nature of how I believe. But Pishtrogs are different. Pishtrogs they go with being unlucky. They go with the sense of, you know, that whatever would be hidden in the shadows of reality is actually malign and is coming for you. I suppose a modern version of that superstitious fear would be people going to horror movies, you know. And we love horror movies. Well, I don't, but people do. They love going to the cinema and watching some poor, vulnerable young girl wandering around some old house with creaking floors, waiting for a kind of a strange, masked, demented ghost to come out of the wall and choke her. It's amazing how we like those things, or some people do, because they make an awful lot of money as movies. And I suppose they're a modern version. They're a sign that the old Pishtrogs weren't off the mark. Do you know what I mean? They were hitting something in the psyche. Some part of us that likes to indulge in the feeling that there's a darkness out there. And I'd be of the other persuasion. I would be always believing that the mysterious, transcendent being that's shimmering on the surface of everything, that it's a benign, not just even a benign force, but a loving force. And that maybe is relevant when I come to talk about the dream that I had last night. In this lovely bed and breakfast, old-fashioned house, like an old hunting lodge, and huge big trees all around me, and the window open because it was June, and I'm lying there in the old-fashioned bed. And I slept well till I went to bed early actually, about 11 o'clock, and I slept until 1:30. And then I woke, and then I went back asleep. And then I had a dream. So I woke at 6 o'clock with the dream at the surface of my consciousness. I dreamt I was doing a theatre performance. It was for the Abbey Theatre. And they had wanted me to perform. And it was a very risque performance. There was a choir behind me singing. And I was dressed with very little clothes on. So I felt very vulnerable. And there was a script that I had written. And the director was saying that it was a wonderful script. And I was saying, but I haven't memorized it. And it was a woman, she was saying, you'll be okay. And so this was about an hour before the show was to go on, and I'm looking in the mirror and dressing in these clothes, and they're not really covering much of my body. And I'm thinking, I don't know the lines. But it'll be okay because I wrote it, so I'll be able to give a version of it. You know, I know the lines in my heart. So they'll come out again if I just trust. If I just trust, sometimes you open your mouth without preparing what you're going to say, and it comes out. You can trust who you are. You can trust who you are to reveal yourself. So I was having that feeling that it'll be okay. And the final context of this, which made it really intense, was that the whole event wasn't going on in the theatre. It wasn't going on in the Abbey Theatre in Dublin or somewhere. It was going on in the cathedral in Cavan. And the choir were on the sanctuary. And I was backstage in the sacristy. And as I say, I was dressed in a strange costume that left my body feeling very vulnerable. And I was about to go out and deliver a very, very kind of sensitive script. I don't know what was in it now, but it was going to be very, very strange and revealing. And I had written it, but I hadn't memorized it. So I was going to have to remember it as I was standing there in front of the audience. And I woke up. And the way that I interpreted that dream was vulnerability of a huge order. Speaking the truth that's in your heart before a huge audience. And yet feeling that you were in the sanctuary of the cathedral. So that in my dreams, over the years, over 50 years, I have had dreams regularly about the church, the sanctuary, the building, the bishop. And even though I would be outside the church, I think that I have retained the symbolism, the archetypal images, the notionality of church, of bishop, of Eucharist. I've retained them deep in my mind, my heart, my subconscious. And so they surface in my dreams as a kind of a language. And they always surface as a language of meaning that indicates positivity. In other words, when I dream of a church, it's always a good sign in my dreams. I might dream of a church, like a little church, and I'm walking along the road and I see a little church. Or I meet somebody standing outside a church. Sometimes I might dream that I was in the church at a mass. Or maybe the bishop was saying the mass. There are different levels of that dream that I have over years. But the one I had last night was so centrally about my own sense of identity as a storyteller, as a secular theatrical performer and writer, telling my story and doing it in a way that I was very vulnerable. And then that all contextualized in the fact that it was happening in the church, which is a place of great security in my dreams. And I woke at about 6 o'clock, and I had a little glass of water, and I lay back again, and I slept until about 7 o'clock. The alarm went off, and I went down for my breakfast and had my 2 sausages and looked out the window and saw the 2 rabbits. And the dream came back to me. Do you know the way the dream, like, it's at the surface of your consciousness when you wake up. But if you don't do anything about it, if you don't write it down, or if you don't make a note of it, it'll be gone by the time you have brushed your teeth. Well, that was the case with me this morning. I made a note of it in my mind at 6. But when I got up at 7, I'd forgotten about it when I was brushing my teeth, when I was putting on my clothes. I wasn't thinking of a dream. I didn't remember that I had a dream. And then I'm sitting at the table, I'm taking me 2 little emaciated sausages with me mug of tea. I'm looking out the window. I see the 2 rabbits. And for some reason, I remember the dream. I think it was the lady the previous night had told me that the rabbits were digging up the lawn, and your man was crucified because he loves a good lawn, a good smooth lawn, and his lawn is pock-marked with holes that are made by the rabbits. And I think there was something about the rabbits digging up the lawn triggered the memory of the dream. You know, it was as if like the lawn is your conscious mind and you're the rabbit, and sometimes you have to dig a wee hole to see what's in underneath your conscious mind. And that's the way dreams are, you know, they're surfacing from underneath the lawn, if you like. But fair play to the 2 rabbits, they helped me to remember me dream. And I came back up to the room and I said to myself, that was a transformative dream. Now, I could have easily forgotten the dream, right? If it weren't for the 2 rabbits, maybe I'd never remember that dream ever. It'd be gone forever, like a fish down the river that you didn't bother looking at. So thanks to the 2 rabbits, the dream was now firmly on the surface of my mind, and I said to myself, that's a terribly important dream. Why? What am I doing in my life that I'm not paying attention to something else? Because usually I find that my dreams are telling me that there's something I'm not paying attention to. So in that dream, I'm performing, I'm vulnerable, I'm rooted within the sanctuary of the cathedral. What is that? What is my mind drawing attention to? And you know something? I began to feel it was about faith. I began to feel, on the one hand, I've had fierce trouble, agony, agitation over the past 6 months in relation to the terrible, traumatic and awful events that are going on in the Middle East. And it's not that other wars didn't go on in the past 10 or 20 years. There was worse wars, those terrible wars. There are terrible wars going on all the time, but for some reason in the West, the conflict in Gaza means something intense to people in the West. And I felt myself conflicted because you'd have this urge to be talking about it. You know, you'd be talking about it over the dinner table, or you'd meet somebody for a chat and you'd want to talk about Gaza and Palestine and demonstrations. You know, it's like I found it hard not to talk about it. But the reason I don't talk about it is because I don't want to get drawn into being on one side of an argument. That's something that I've really struggled to do all my life. I remember there was a phrase, it was in the Old Testament. It said, don't interfere when people are having an argument. You might as well go down the road and pull the ears of a mad dog. Usually you're not helping if you involve yourself in somebody else's argument, even though their argument draws you in and you want to take up one side or another. And that happens really intensely with the war in the Middle East, that that people tend to be on one side or another, and you feel you should be, you feel you have a viewpoint one way or the other, and you always feel that your viewpoint is the right one, the correct one. So if you think you're right about the conflict in the Middle East, you'd have a fierce urge to say something about it. And I've found it over 6 months very difficult. Number one, not to just spontaneously, automatically fall into arguments, which would be simply indulging my sense that I'm right. But also, I've been reluctant to get into discussions about that war because I feel I would lose my balance, my serenity. It's as if, it's like two people having a row in a room. You could be at a party, let's say a family party, and there's an extended amount of people at it and everybody's very happy. And imagine then two people, let's say your uncle and your nephew, and they start arguing and it becomes loud and overt, and suddenly they're in the kitchen shouting at each other. Well, you know the way that completely destroys the entire atmosphere. You can imagine somebody chastising them and saying, you've spoiled the party, you've ruined everything. And you can't recover from that. Once two people bring an argument into a room, the night is over. Same thing can happen even in a marriage. In some way, there's an energy of negativity that you can unleash with the other person. And it ruins everything. It can never be unsaid, Rumi's powerful and beautiful line, and he says, words are like arrows. Once they leave the bow, you can never bring them back. And we fall into these senses, compulsive senses. I have to say this because it's true, and I am going to indulge myself in telling you what the truth is. It's called righteousness. And it's really, really tricky when you have something, as I say, like an argument in a room. You feel you're being sucked into it and you want to side with one or the other. And it's 10 times worse when you have a war and everybody's paying attention to it, as they are to this particular war, and you just want to say your piece. You want to have your opinion, because your opinion is the truth. Absolutely, your opinion is the truth. No matter which side you're on, because we all suffer from this conviction that what I say is the truth. You're wrong, I'm not wrong, you're wrong. So I found this sense of trying to remain serene and calm during some of the most horrendous moments that we've had in the past 6 months, and some just terribly disturbing images of violence. And it's been difficult. And for some reason, the dream last night connected me with that problem and gave me the answer. To be in a space like a sanctuary, like a cathedral, to have a choir at your back, to be performing, as I do, like a storyteller, before an audience. It's such a beautiful image to be vulnerable, to be almost naked, to be just vulnerably saying your truth in a beautiful way with a choir behind you, in a church, in a cathedral. That is such a beautiful image of how to speak. To speak in your own vulnerability, to speak from your heart, to speak from the sacred. And so when I got up this morning, it was like all my dilemmas about how to speak in relation to Gaza were solved, because the dream in images, in poetic images, was showing me this is how to speak. This is how to speak. Not speaking like you know all or everything. Not speaking like you're right and somebody else is wrong. Not speak like you're lecturing other people about morality. But speaking out of the sacred, speaking out of vulnerability, speaking aesthetically like that it might be beautiful what you say. And that there is a way to do that even in times of war. Well, I can tell you, it didn't take me more than 2 minutes after that, after the breakfast. It didn't take me 2 minutes to conclude that I need to look again at my little Buddhist principles and teachings. Now, that's where the images in dreams can be confusing. Because I could dream of a Christian sanctuary, but it's not literally, Christianity that it's drawing me towards. It's simply that in my unconscious I use the Christian sanctuary as part of the grammar of meaning. And for me, sanctuary means the sacred. And it means calm abiding. And having few clothes on is an image of vulnerability, but also one of like not masking yourself, not being afraid to be who you are in your vulnerability. And all that, of course, immediately brought me to Buddhist practice. There was one line came into my mind in the prayer of the Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. This is something that I have talked about many times on podcasts, but Tsongkhapa was 15th century monk, intellectual teacher in Tibet. He gathered all the teachings of Buddhism together and made them into a sort of a system that was easy to understand and learn. And it's called the Lam Rim. The Lam Rim is a kind of a methodology of learning and practicing Buddhist teachings. Now, everybody knows, the Four Noble Truths. So when you're saying a prayer in Buddhist practice, you say, May all sentient beings possess happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be separated from suffering and the cause of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that knows no suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion, holding some close and others distant. So the core of it is really this wish that you have that all beings might achieve happiness. May all sentient beings, including like the rabbits out in the garden, and the insects, and everything that is sentient, may all sentient beings possess happiness. Now, that is transformative. Even on its own, that one single wish seems to me could bring you to enlightenment. You wouldn't have to study any other text. You wouldn't have to do any other prayer. You wouldn't have to do anything except that one wish. If you kept that wish in your heart 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, if you just did that wish as a kind of a way of being in the world, you would reach enlightenment. May all sentient beings possess happiness and the causes of happiness. Because normally we get a feel-good experience when we wish for our own happiness. Normally 24/7, I'm wishing for my own happiness. I want the sausages to be nice at breakfast. I want the tea to be not too weak and not too strong. I'm always wishing something for my own happiness. But imagine if the big wish in your heart was for other people. That is to say, instead of wishing yourself happiness, you sat down for 3 minutes, you kept your back straight, and you said, I wish for other people to attain happiness. Well, you'd realize that that's something you don't normally do. And you'd have a problem because you'd be thinking, well, who am I talking about when I say other people? And that's why in the Tibetan tradition, they divide it into categories. There's a lovely, beautiful meditation about White Tara, and it begins like this. It says, surround yourself with family. That's your mother, your father, your siblings. Your husband, your wife, your children. Surround yourself with close relatives. Uncles and aunts, cousins, grandchildren, people, even people who may have passed away, like grandparents. Close relatives. Friends, surround yourself with friends. And visualize a few friends, all sitting around. And then strangers. Imagine strangers around you. People you don't know, people you meet in the street, but you don't know who they are. And finally, people you don't get on with. Imagine people you don't get on with. I always pick 3 or 4 people, and it changes from year to year, funny enough. If I look back 10 years ago, there were people I used to put in this category of people I don't get on with. But now I don't. Now I have new people that I don't get on with. And so you visualize people around you, and then you wish. You generate a wish in your heart. Like if you're sitting straight, you might be in a meditation position or kneeling or in a chair, but definitely with your back straight, your head up straight. And you kind of feel it physically in your heart. You feel like your heart is sending out a vibration. You see, your heart is sending out like rays of light. that are zapping straight into the heart of the other people all around you, the mother, the father, the sibling, the children, the friends, the strangers, and the people you don't get on with, particularly those. You're now actually sort of visualizing your enemy in front of you, somebody that you can't stand, and you're actually, with your heart, physically wishing them well. Now that breaks down a protective wall that we always have around us. The protective wall is, I'm the most important person in the world, and I look after myself, and I wish I was happy. And I desperately want to be happy. And I will go to the therapist or to the entertainment or to the friend or the lover. I will always just be looking for my happiness. And for this 2 minutes, you're going to sit down and be still and wish. It seems perverted, really, doesn't it? Somebody that you don't like, it's hard, actually, sometimes to bring them into your mind, I find, you know? It would irritate me to think about them. I usually suppress their memory or I keep them away from my conscious mind, people that I don't like, and they're just out there somewhere, but they don't annoy me as long as I don't think about them. So why would I actually conjure them up and visualize them and imagine them in the room with me? And then how could I possibly wish them well and with my heart physically, like as I sit there, just try and send out this love and blessing. May all sentient beings possess happiness and the cause of happiness. This is the wish. This is the great wish for other people's happiness. And it's a key in Buddhism. If you did nothing else in Buddhism but that, you would reach enlightenment. And you can see how it completely dovetails with Christian faith. You know, Christian faith sort of embraces the world. It embraces skills. It embraces psychology or science, or in this regard, Buddhist philosophy. And they're compatible because Buddhist philosophy is not a revealed religion, but Buddhist philosophy is not telling you that there is a God which is contrary to what you're being told in the Christian story. So you can be an atheist or post-Christian and absorb the skills and techniques of Buddhism and just use them the same way as you might use mindfulness training, and you will find that they're helpful. But if you have a devout joy that comes from holding Jesus or the Blessed Mother or whoever, within the Christian tradition, you're not undermining any of that when you practice Buddhist skills, no more than you're undermining it when you drive a car or study psychology. Because Buddhism in this way is a technique of mind training. And the mind is happy to be 100% self-absorbed, 100% thinking about my well-being and wishing me that I might have happiness. So when you do a little practice for 2 minutes, wishing other people happiness, it's subversive. It's like it's putting things upside down in your mind. It's training you to. And you see, the wonderful thing is that when you're kind of absorbed with somebody else, you're happy because you have forgotten about yourself. And the secret of happiness is thinking about others. And Buddhism is just practicing. Practice in this. There's a beautiful book that Tsongkhapa wrote. I think it's called The Swift Path. He means the swift pathway to enlightenment. And he divides it into 3 sections: renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view. Now, by renunciation, he means that sense of letting go of your own self-obsession. Like, you can practice renunciation in all sorts of complicated ways by, staying off meat or fasting from some foods, or, you can, as they used to say in Christian times, you can mortify the flesh. That's okay. Or you can experience renunciation in doing somebody else's will rather than your own. Sometimes a parent has to, practice renunciation every minute of the day because you're serving your children. And it happens in marriage or love relationships as well. You're kind of, the more you serve the other person, the more happiness you get. So renunciation is kind of okay, but that one little idea of making a wish for somebody else's happiness is a renunciation. It's not focusing on renunciation, it's focusing on the other person, but by focusing on the other person, it is renunciation, because you have to renounce yourself to think about the other person. And you can do it automatically. Like, you can be talking to somebody and they're telling you that they're going on holiday. And there's an instinctive bit in me, if all of a sudden I hear somebody's going out to, the Algarve for a week in the sun, and I just feel jealous. It can make me feel nasty for just a split second, like, feck them, Why don't I go out there? But even in that moment, if I practice some sense of just focusing on them and then kind of in some way being able to send them from my heart a kind of a vibration, of kind of a wish that I really hope that I really hope that you get on well and you really enjoy the holiday, and that it's refreshing for you, and that it brings you happiness. That's renunciation. So that wish is an amazing thing, And then Tsongkhapa in the Swift Path, he says that the first way is renunciation, and the second way is bodhicitta. Now, bodhicitta is the same as renunciation. In other words, renunciation refers to me. I am renouncing, my own self-obsession, and bodhicitta is simply love and compassion. It's a word that really means compassion, to feel that you're generating love for the other person. You might think, well, that's a strange and simple kind of practice, You could stand at the bus stop and just practice loving other people. You'd wonder, would that be sensible, until you realise that if you're not loving other people, you're there at the bus stop loving yourself. Because our conscious mind, our self-awareness, is ever present as long as we're awake. And its default position is self-interest and self-love and self-preservation. So I could be at the bus stop, utterly exhausted, worrying about myself, thinking about myself, loving myself, wanting happiness for myself. Or I could be at the bus stop looking at the person beside me and not even knowing them, I could be in some sense sending out a wish. I hope that person, I hope whoever you are, that you find happiness and joy in your life today. And you can see where it's a prayer. I mean, it's so close, this practice, to just prayerfulness. But when Tsongkhapa talks about these three things, renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view, it's that final one that I really, really want to say a little word about before I go. It's the most important one for me, and it's the one that matters to me this morning. So I came to this lovely bed and breakfast, this lovely old-fashioned quiet place. I saw me 2 little rabbits yesterday evening. I got up this morning, had me breakfast, and I looked out the window and I saw the 2 little rabbits again, digging holes in the lawn. And that triggered a memory of a dream that I'd had when I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning. And the dream was this kind of beautiful, it was like a kind of mystical wedding, you know. I was dressed but vulnerable. I was about to kind of perform something that I had created, but I didn't have the script. So it was a moment of fear and fright. It was a moment of trust and feeling that I am in the sacred space always. And I must be in the sacred space. When you want to perform or speak or be, if you're standing on sacred ground, you will be well. That's what the dream was saying. And I related it to anxieties I've had over the 6 months about that terrible war in the Middle East, and trying not to get sucked into it, and angry and, and argumentative about one side or the other. And how do I speak? How do I sing? How do I maintain a vulnerability and a compassion without getting sucked into that vortex of anger and death? And that's where the Buddhist idea came to me. I need to get back to the Buddhist stuff. Renunciation, yes. Bodhicitta, yes. But most importantly, correct view. Now, I'll say a word about this amazing idea that's in Tibetan Buddhism for the past 1,000 years, and probably, I imagine, within the Buddhist sutras for 2,500 years. Correct view says that there are 2 extremes. There are 2 extreme ways of looking at what is true. One is what they call substantialism. And the best way I can describe it is, it's like that things are literally true, and that what you believe is always true. That's substantialism. If you've an opinion, let's say on, let's say the Irish elections, or the war in Gaza, you've an opinion. You see a particular side, and you want to argue that side almost to the point that you are enraged and exhausted by anger. And you want to do it because you know that's the truth. You know that the view you have is absolutely the truth. And you can't understand why other people don't accept it. That's substantialism in Buddhist terms. And that's an extreme position. And the opposite extreme, they would say, is, I suppose again, in our terms, what you'd call nihilism. a sense that nothing matters, right? A sense that, like, when somebody asks you about what you think of the war in Gaza, or what you think of the politics in Ireland, or what you think of the weather, what you think of your children, what you think of your neighbour, that you have an attitude which is best summed up in the crude phrase, and I'm going to use a very crude phrase, so prepare yourself. It's a real Irish phrase: I couldn't give a fuck. Do you know that kind of attitude? You say to somebody, what do you think of this? Well, I couldn't give a fuck. Couldn't. Nothing. It's a kind of a nihilism. So they're the two extremes. And on the one side you have the fanatic. You see coming down the road and they're going to rant at you about some issue. And then the other is the person that you see coming down the road, and you know that they're so sour about everything that you'll go away feeling dirtied. And they're two extremes. And the way to live in the world from a Buddhist point of view is somewhere between the two. Correct view is the middle view. It's the view that says this is true, but the opposite is also true. It's such a... I played Tevye one time in Fiddler on the Roof when I was a young fella. It was a student production. And I used to love a particular thing that happened with Tevye where somebody says, his one daughter says, I want to leave this village because I feel claustrophobic and I'd prefer being in the city. And he says, you're right. You must do it. And then the next daughter says, I want to marry the local milkman or whoever because I love this little village. And he says, you're right. And then his wife says to him, well, they can't both be right. And he looks at her, he says, you are right too. The middle way is able to find the truth in every position, but is also never dragged into the zealotry or conviction that something is absolutely true. It's like something is true as far as it goes. It's another way to put it, I always say about Christian practice, to use it if it works for you. If it gets you through the day, practice it and see does it work. Don't practice it because you've decided it's true, like absolutely true. There is a God, there is a Christ, there is a church, and then you end up in a kind of an argumentative position with people who don't believe that. Just practice it and see does it work for you. And I think the same is valid for every way of believing. If you're secular, even if you're Marxist, which wouldn't be my cup of tea at all, but see, does it bring you happiness? And this is a beautiful space, you see, that Buddhism opens up for me. Sometimes when you hear the word Buddhist, it's like a new fashion, Christianity has gone out of fashion and everybody hates Christianity, and then, but I'm a Buddhist. And you think this is too fashionable. And then sometimes it sounds too obscure. It sounds like almost something elitist. But the way I look at Buddhism is it's very, very simple. It opens up a space within you where you can be faithful, you can pray, you can be religious, you can be Christian, but you can be anything. You can be anything, and you can accept people more from other intellectual spaces, people with different views and positions. Because you're accepting that the bottom line, the real dynamic of reality, is in the Four Noble Truths. May all sentient beings possess happiness. And you're wishing. A fellow asked the Dalai Lama one time, how do I become a Buddhist? And the Dalai Lama said, this was a question and answer. The Dalai Lama said, get up early in the morning. That's all. You get up in the morning if you have intention, you know. Now, I'm being a total hypocrite here because I'm not doing any old Buddhist practice for a long time. But I felt that my dream last night was calling me to wake up. It was calling me to get a little bit more Buddhist practice going. Even if it's only just getting up early in the morning and having 3 minutes meditation. 3 minutes. You think maybe if I was a Buddhist I'd have to get up and spend an hour on my knees or something with incense. No. 3 minutes, 1 minute. Think about the great wish where you actually, with your whole body and conscious mind, from your heart are sending out vibrations of good wishes to other people. Other people, friends, strangers, and people you don't get on with. And do it as a practice, because it won't come naturally. Our default position is me, me, me. No matter how good we are, no matter how good people think we are, the feckin' truth is, I am 100% self-interest. Unless I actually make an effort to be otherwise. And that little practice, it's the same as yoga, it's the same as doing, going for a run will improve your body. Practice at anything can change who you are, physically or mentally, because your mind is like a muscle. And doing that little thought of having a great wish for another person, wishing may all sentient beings possess happiness. Just that line, may all sentient beings possess happiness, and the causes of happiness. And that brings us into that whole idea of, well, what are the causes? And the answer is renunciation, compassion, and correct view. You'll never be happy if you're right. If you think you're right and you think you're 100% right about the war in the Middle East or the politics in Ireland or Britain or Brexit or Northern Ireland or whatever is your local issue, if you think you're the one who's right, if you think you're right about Catholicism, if you think you're right about whatever, you'll never be happy. Isn't that amazing? You'll only be happy if you practice renunciation, compassion for others, and correct view, which is saying, like, never end up with the team that says, I couldn't give a fuck. Never end up there. That's despondency, it's despair. But never end up with the club that is completely convinced we are right, the others are wrong. Always try and find the middle ground. the space where it is possible to be a Christian, it's possible to be anything, so long as you're feeling it gets me through the day. And getting through the day, I'm sending a wish out that other people be happy, even if their pathway is different from mine, even if their view of the world is different from mine. And that, my friends, from a little bed and breakfast in Lismore, that's my podcast for this week. I've had to keep the voice a little bit down because I don't want to be heard in the next room, although I don't think there's anybody in there now at the moment. But that's my heartfelt realization in this moment, and I think I have released myself from a certain amount of agony that we've all felt over the past 6 months. This bombardment of Gaza, this terrible war, this complexity of, how Israel and how Palestine can coexist. All this stuff is so disturbing, and for some reason has bored itself into the Western mind in a very deep way. And it's very difficult because you want to speak about it and you don't want to get sort of sucked into the vortex of somebody else's argument. But you want to speak, you want to be honest. And for me, this morning it seemed like this is a very, very important space for Buddhist practice. This is exactly where the Buddhist mindfulness is needed, because it keeps you from one extreme or the other. Keeps you in the middle ground, where instead of obsessing on the fact that you're right, or going to the other extreme where you say, I couldn't give a fuck about anybody, it keeps you in the middle ground, not that you're right, but that you're deeply praying that all other sentient beings will find happiness. And in doing that prayer, the funny thing is, you focus on other people, it is the way to happiness, and you get happiness because you're thinking about other people. Isn't it a funny world? And it's the middle of June and it's raining non-stop outside my window. But I'm happy. I'm happy now, and I hope you are too. And thank you for being here. Bye-bye.